Turning to you, François Frey, CEO of Esprit de Velox. Esprit de Velox was launched in 2014 with around a dozen volunteers, around 50 partner companies, a research lab. What's your objective? Well, 10 years back, before COP21, before the COP21, oceans were not really on the radar in biodiversity or climate conversations. In rooms just like these with industrial players in the maritime industry, decarbonization was definitely not on the agenda. 10 years back, this is something that was really not on the agenda of the IMO. And back then, people would have said, look, just go and try to do something with the air industry, because what they're doing is so much worse than what we do. But oceans account for half of the world's climate and biodiversity challenges, but less than 2% of world research budget. So that's quite a huge gap. More than 95% of what's happening in the ocean is completely unknown to us. We're very interested by the areas ranging from the tropics to the north or south poles. And when we look at maps, we can see 1,830 or 50. Okay, so maps dating back from 1830, 1850, maybe, a few things have happened since then. And, last night we thought, okay, we are in the Titanic ballroom, and the accident happened 50 years ago, and it's still hard for us to understand, to get to grasp with the fact that that accident happened. So for the past 8 years, at our own scale, with a sphere of influence that's growing in importance, we're trying to put things back in the right order. So first of all, it means that we've worked with scientists to help them understand what ocean sciences may look like in the next 30 years with that 2050 milestone. And then quite quickly we realized that actually we needed to do science differently by working on an interdisciplinary basis, which is something you all try to do in your respective companies too. So working with specialists who will be complementing one another, since when you work together, you always go faster. And we also want to work closer to the ocean world. What's absolutely amazing when you're at sea is that you're never quite at home, and so you shouldn't. So how can you bring together people who proclaim to be ocean scientists, who may go at sea for long assignments 7-8 times in their lifetimes, so that they think in a way that can be merged seamlessly into the ocean in a completely impact-free way. 2014, 2015, that impact-free was our approach before the IMO, before the UN defined milestones by 2030 and by 2050. So back then we thought, right, how can we work at sea, being completely invisible and oblivious to the marine world without creating any disturbances? When you work on climate sciences, when you collect water and air, to make things very short, to track biological gases, heavy materials, and you have to use really heavy material, then there might be, some sort of a discrepancy. So we thought, okay, so we should not be rejecting anything, releasing anything into the air and nor into the water. And moreover, and this is something that will be particularly important in the 20 years to come, without making any noise. Noise today is a completely unknown impact for sea professionals, for the public at large, and yet it has wide-ranging impact in terms of biodiversity. For example, large sea animals fleeing noise and dying because of noise. But there's also an impact on climate. If you have a huge ship going by, plankton, which produces half of the oxygen, which is so important for us, will stop producing that oxygen because of that noise. You can also think of the fleet at sea, the traffic at sea, along these main so-called routes. Oxygen production levels are dropping at alarming levels. So it's a biodiversity and a climate problem. And so from 2016 and 2017, we decided to try to come up with a platform through which we could do scientific work, but in a completely invisible manner for the climate. So with that Scandinavian and Swiss angle, because they really were pioneers in this field, we constituted an initial pool of companies that we've worked with since 2016, roughly. So now there are 10 of us working on this project, steering this project, but there are more than 1,000 people, engineers, technicians, who are working on the project. And the idea would be to complete our studies by mid-2025 and to be at sea by the start of 2027, to go around the Atlantic on a large, on a wide tour to just, check that everything is okay. And we're also working with the French oceanographic fleet and French authorities, who have asked us to go to the Pacific, which is a very important area indeed for other reasons, as we discussed yesterday, and yet an area which is almost unknown from a scientific viewpoint. So the idea would be to go over there by 2028 with a platform that will be 70 meter long. There you have it on the slide. With around 50 people on board who will be fully autonomous from an energy standpoint. So the only energy which will be used on board will be produced on board, so clean energy. And there will be up to 30 researchers for up to 100 days at sea. We do not have any fossil fuels on that ship. Okay, so you're using what kind of a propulsion system? Well, sail with the sails in the first place, and there will be a grid as well, a grid system. Producing electricity on board is quite easy with the wind, with the sun, also with the waves. And it's also quite simple to say, look, these are objects with a rather important life cycle, 50 years. So it will be quite interesting. It will be quite easy to plug or unplug on that electric grid things we may not necessarily be thinking of today, but which are currently being prepared with the industrial players with whom we're partnering and which will emerge gradually. Okay, so by design, it was this is a boat which will be adapted to future technologies. This is something that we worked on with the IMO, with ship owners, with innovators. Eric Blanel also is someone we've been working with the Bureau Veritas as well. And some of the things that were discussed yesterday, well, we are an island on our own, and this island needs to be able to live, whether it is circulating around the poles or in the tropics. So you have teams, you have a zero impact boat, which can go at sea for around 100 days. Because, well, you need to collect data, and this is an impact free. So what will be the speed? Well, actually, we'll be going at a speed that's completely similar to the current scientific programs, between 8 and 12 knots. So absolutely no race here. We'll be moving at a pace that's completely similar to scientific programs at sea today. So you'll be collecting various types of data. You spoke of SAM data, biodiversity. You will not be able to do it all at the same time. What will be your priority for your first time around? Well, actually, we'll be doing everything at the same time, and that was really a strategic choice from our scientists. The idea really is to get out of, to go away from the beaten track. When you have a scientific program at sea, you might want to collect data which are relevant for your very own program, but also for biologists. And unfortunately, due to the silo system in scientific funding, sometimes for as much as you may have data to be collecting as you go, you cannot do that because you do not have the funding for that. But here we really want to go out sea with at least three scientific teams, each with their own specialty, and we'll have hard and human sciences in each of these teams, and they'll be associated with certain number of artists as well, because they have a vision that goes beyond that of scientists. And something that's incredible is that artists have absolutely no zone of comfort whatsoever, contrary to scientists. And when you sell a scientific program to on board, that is just the way that you may sell a product. In a company, you need to know the result before operations happen. But in sciences, you need doors to be open. And given the current sense of emergency, we need to have that kind of strategy in your scientific approach. So we will be multiplying the number of eyes on the same topic. Okay, so you have public and private funding. With regards to your private partners, well, your technological private partners, apart from labs? Well, first of all, energy players. So ABB, for example, which is a huge European player, even larger than Europe, actually, but they were heavily involved in the project. There will also be companies which are interested in developing energy production from sites or situations which are somewhat experimental to this day. We're working with NG and the Atlantic projects on electricity production and sailing, and for the past 3 years we have made tests to optimize production and to integrate risks. So SOLAS, color code, we need to minimize risks for the teams who will be on board, and we need to have that level of autonomy both in the tropics and in both poles. So we need to work with industrial players on storing, electric production, power generation, and propulsion. If all goes well to this day, for your propeller, you will be having an efficiency of 65%, but due to our propulsion choice, we would be losing out on 35% of that power. So we've worked with a startup, with a large French group, which usually produces grayer ships, and here we'll be going up to 90% on a system that's reversible, that can generate power when you're sailing with a power reserve. So we have completely redistributed these roles and functions with our platform to have that real cooperation approach with our partners and with industrial players, and to have a platform which can live off of almost off-the-shelf elements which were not necessarily related to the maritime, in the sense that these were land applications more frequently, and then we can mix everything up so that the flag and the ranking institutions can give their green light, and then once we go out sea, SOLAS will be probably completely questioned in its current rules of operations. And here there are alternative routes, but very often that's not possible because ship owners, for example, have no money to do that, so they do not opt for these alternative solutions. But we want to take that risk because it's very important to create that industrial ecosystem, which will then be used by further players to no longer say, look, this is impossible. No, everything is possible. And then hopefully very quickly we'll be achieving our objectives to reduce environmental impacts.
But also to reduce geostrategic impacts. We've been seeing it since the Ukraine war. The cost of fuels went through certain developments. The French oceanographic fleet is docked several months a year because there are no budgets. Science is a bit like fishing. A price per day is decided half by the fuels that you'll put on board. We have no fuel. So very quickly, it's very exciting, but this is almost the end of this discussion. It's a bit more trivial, but the financial impact, is it fully funded, the platform? It's 50% funded. So the companies that provide the onboard solutions provide R&D. It's a real investment for them because we're helping a whole value chain emerge. And we're working with government bodies with the French stimulus plan because the government's asking us to be a stakeholder in the power generation and operation of the boat to the tune of 20 to 25%. So right now we're indeed trying to find major sponsors to finance roughly half. So 45 to 50 million we still need to find. Very clear. Thank you very much to the two of you. I wish we could have more time to keep the discussion going, but we'll need to go to the break. So thank you anyway for your insights.